The story of David and Goliath, sadly, is oftentimes told as if it were a fairy tale for children, with the many resulting fictitious notions that cloud the original account. But the significance of David and his contribution to the Old Testament is remarkable, and often cast aside as a thing of naught. In the authorized King James Version of the Bible contained in the Old Testament, an amazing testimony of David and Solomon, both great acts and small, contained in the following books of the Bible. That is, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, David's Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Amos, and Zechariah. In David's Psalms, he personally wrote 75 of them, which shows his poetic genius. There is much information contained in the pages written about Solomon his son, and Solomon wrote a portion of Proverbs and the entire Song of Solomon. In all, this makes up about 1/5 of the Old Testament. As an example, the Pentateuch of Moses is comprised of a similar amount of information. So if we take away the entire book of Genesis, the remaining books are about Moses. This also makes up about 1/5 of the Old Testament as well, which by comparison shows the importance of David and the large amount of the Bible that pertains to his history. David's name was mentioned over 1,000 times in the Old Testament and 58 times in the New Testament. The story of David cannot be told without first noting the Israelite king Saul. In Samuel chapter 8, when Israel seeks a king to rule over them, Samuel warns them of the evils of kingly rule. And in the last verse, the Lord said to Samuel, "Hearken unto their voice, and make them a king." Saul was described in 1 Samuel 9:2. Speaking of Saul, from his shoulders and upwards, he was higher than any of the people. According to Noah Webster's original 1828 dictionary, a biblical cubit was, as Dr. Arbuthnot stated, the cubit of the Scriptures. It was a little less than 22 inches. So because of the 21-plus inch cubit, that being the distance from the fingertip to the elbow, it would have made the height of the average Israelite at about 6 feet tall, assuming that the average Israelite was the size of the cubit from fingertip to elbow. Then Saul would have been 7+ feet tall. Truly a man of kingly stature. In chapter 10, the Lord gave Saul another heart. He prophesied among the prophets. And so it was, the Lord gave them their king. Chapter 10, verse 19. And ye have this day rejected your God, who himself saved you out of all of your adversities and your tribulations. And ye have said unto him, Nay, but set a king over us. When they cast their lots, and Saul the son of Kish was taken, and when they sought him, he could not be found. Therefore they inquired of the Lord further if the man should yet come thither. And the Lord answered, Behold, he hath hidden himself among the stuff. And they ran and fetched him thence. And when he stood among the people, he was higher than any of the people from his shoulders and upward. And Samuel said to all the people, See ye whom the Lord has chosen, that there is none like him among all of the people. And all the people shouted and said, God save the king. Later King Saul sinned against the Lord, and several times he took it upon himself to disobey the Lord. As a consequence of this, the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. David is first mentioned in 1 Samuel 16:11, where he is anointed by Samuel. In verse 6, Samuel saw Eliab, David's older brother, whom he thought would be the Lord's anointed. But in verse 7, the Lord said to Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or the height of his stature. So David's brother Eliab was probably very tall, as most likely was the rest of his brothers tall as well. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down until he come hither. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said unto him, Behold, now an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. Let our Lord now command thy servants which are before thee to seek out a man, who is a cunning player on an harp. And it shall come to pass, when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. And Saul said unto his servants, Provide me now a man that can play well, and bring him to me. Then answered one of the servants and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant man, a man of war, prudent in manners, and a comely person. And the Lord is with him. Wherefore Saul sent messengers unto Jesse, and said, Send me David thy son, which is with the sheep. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread, and a bottle of wine, and a kid, and sent them with David his son unto Saul. And David came to Saul, and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor-bearer. So King Saul accepted David, and Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight. So David became Saul's armor-bearer, and played a harp for King Saul in his court, and was well acquainted with Saul before the battle with Goliath. Saul would not have a mere boy bear his armor, in that it was an honored position of high rank that required a valiant man of great strength and skill to protect the king. 1 Samuel 17:13, 14, and 15. Then came the Philistines to war against Israel. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. David by this time in his life would also have had the traditional beard of the Hebrew man. See 2 Samuel 10, 4 and 5. What did David look like? Samuel 16:12. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. Samuel 17:42. And when Goliath looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of fair countenance. very youthful with a healthy reddish complexion, a very pleasant and young-looking face. He was also a talented musician and a dancer, and also an expert marksman with a sling, and incredibly strong, killing a lion and a bear with his bare hands. Samuel 17, verse 16. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. And look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. And David left his carriage in the hands of the keeper of the carriages, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man who killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. David said moreover, The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. So we see that King Saul was well acquainted with David. Was David tall? And Saul armed David with his armor. What is this? Saul armed David with his personal armor? Is this the same armor that was stripped from Saul at his death and displayed in the house of Ashtaroth by his enemies? Undoubtedly, the armor of a king was of prize indeed, but this was too large for an average-sized man to wear, or it would have been claimed and taken for use because of the value of it in battle. But it was not too large for David. David was incredibly strong. As a shepherd, he killed a lion and a bear. I went after him, the lion, and smote him, and delivered the lamb out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. How powerful would a man be in order to achieve such an amazing feat of strength in order to kill a lion with his bare hands? In Psalms 18:32-34, David said, It is God that girdeth me with strength, and maketh my way perfect. He maketh my feet like the hind's feet, and setteth me upon my high places. He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. David was also able to wield the sword of the giant Goliath, which he obtained from Ahimelech the priest. Another insight into the strength and size of David. According to Young's Analytical Concordance, if you take the date of the battle, 1063 BC, minus the date of David's birth, 1086 BC, then you come up with his age of 23 when he fought Goliath. He had a ruddy or a healthy reddish complexion and very young-looking face. Also, he must have been very muscular and tall. So David was but a youth. He was only 30 years old when he started to reign over Judah, and 37 when he was made king over all of Israel. Goliath of Gath, a champion of the Philistines, was 6 cubits and a span in height. He would be 6 cubits, that is 6 times 21 inches, plus a span, 9 inches. The distance from the end of the thumb to the end of the little finger when the hand is fully extended, which gives us 11 feet 3 inches tall. So he would have weighed easily in at 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. He had a helmet of brass, 15 to 20 pounds, and a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, or about 150 pounds. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, approximately 15 pounds each, which equals 30 pounds. A target of brass between his shoulders, 30 to 50 pounds. And what a spectacle that giant would have made on the field of battle. In all probability his armor would have been polished bright brass, with the sun glistening off his armor as he sallied forth from conquest to conquest. It would have been a fearsome sight to behold. His spearhead alone weighed about 18 pounds, and the shaft was like a weaver's beam, most likely 11 feet or so, and probably around 20 pounds, making the total weight of his spear about 38 pounds. A normal-sized spear of this type weighed in at about 12 to 16 pounds. He probably was carrying about 300 to 400 pounds of weapons and armor, but because of his size it would still be a comfortable weight of armor to size of man. He was a man of war from his youth. In 1964, the famous Kafar Monash hoard of weapons was found in Tel Gath, Israel. Found among this hoard was a giant spearhead weighing in at 5 pounds. That was 26 inches tall, of brass, and amazingly also found 800 scales of brass from a coat of mail, presumed by some to be from one coat of mail, a giant coat. Ishbi-Benob, the brother of Goliath, had a spearhead that weighed 300 shekels, or about 9 pounds in weight. He was also a giant, but no information is available of his size, although Goliath's spearhead was 600 shekels of iron, about 18 pounds. An interesting claim made in the pseudo-phyla of the Old Testament that David and Goliath were cousins, through Ruth and her sister Orpah. Ruth the Moabitess was David's great-grandmother. Was Goliath descended from Orpah? The sling as a weapon in skillful hands was devastating. Describing the Benjaminites in Judges 20:16, among all this people were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss. Thousands died in the ensuing battle between the Benjaminites and all of Israel, with the sling playing a significant role in the battle. Many years later, Alexander the Great had skirmishers that successfully used the sling in his battles of conquest. In our times, it is reported that a sling made of monofilament line can sink a piece of double-aught buckshot 2 inches deep into a telephone pole, equivalent to a .22 caliber short casing bullet. Goliath probably didn't consider the sling as a weapon could hurt him. He had a shield bearer to protect him from projectiles. David had 5 chances to hit the giant from about the distance that a voice would carry. David could see that the only weakness in the armor of Goliath was a bare forehead. A big, broad giant's forehead would be a good target to hit. Also, he was young and very athletic, and clad in a loose-fitting shepherd's garb. He could have easily outrun the giant because of the weight of his armor, even though he would have never chosen to run. 1 Samuel 17:37. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff in his hand, and weighed him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag that he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David. And the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said unto David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh to the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and unto the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, David had absolutely no fear of Goliath. He had faith that the Lord would deliver Goliath into his hand. And the proof is this. David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And he fell upon his face to the earth. In the Geneva Bible it says, And smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sticked in his forehead, and he fell groveling to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. Another feat of great strength. What would be the repercussions if David lost the contest? He would have been killed, and that would have demoralized the entire Israelite army, who might have been defeated in the war. It was only through David's faith in God that gave him the confidence and skill that David needed to defeat this mighty giant warrior. Would a mere boy be trusted to battle the giant, knowing the consequences of the failure? And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put his armor, 300 to 400 pounds, in his tent. Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with the head in one hand, approximately 100 pounds. So David proved that he was indeed a mighty valiant man, a man of war, prudent in manners, and a comely person. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war. Would a mere boy be set over the men of war and be accepted? And he was accepted in the sight of all the people, also the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. When David had to flee from King Saul, who wished to kill him, he sought food from Ahimelech the priest, and a weapon. And the priest said, The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. 1 Samuel 21:9. And David said, There is none like that. Give it me. A normal-sized man would not be able to use this mighty sword. And for giving the sword to David, Ahimelech and 84 of his father's house were murdered by the edict of Saul, and the treachery of Doeg, an Edomite, the servant of Saul, who betrayed Ahimelech for helping David. David had a company of 37 mighty men of great renown, famous for their exploits. They were armed with bows and swords and spears, and could use the right and left hand in slinging stones and shooting arrows out of a bow. These are the names of some of the chiefest. Adino the Eznite. He lifted up his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time. He was the mightiest of the 30. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo the Ahohite, one of the 3 mighties. He was with David at Pasdammim, where the Philistines were gathered together for battle, where was a parcel of ground full of barley, and the people fled from before the Philistines. And they set themselves in the midst of that parcel, and delivered it, and slew the Philistines. And the Lord saved them by a great deliverance. In Chronicles 11 it speaks of 3 of his mighty men breaking through the gate of a Philistine garrison at Bethlehem to draw water from the well. Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. Also he went down and slew a lion in a pit on a snowy day. And he slew an Egyptian, a man of great stature, 5 cubits high, almost 9 feet. And the Egyptian's hand was a spear like a weaver's beam. And he went down to him with a staff, and he plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. Among them the Gadites. There separated themselves unto David into the hold, to the wilderness, men of might, and men of war fit for the battle, that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and like David were as swift as the roes upon the mountains. And there came of the children of Benjamin and Judah to the hold unto David. And David went out to meet them, and answered and said unto them, If ye come peaceably unto me to help me, then mine heart shall be knit unto you. But if you come to betray me to my enemies, seeing there is no wrong in mine hands, the God of our fathers look thereon and rebuke it. Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, who was the chief of the captains, and he said, Thine are we, David, and on thy side, thou son of Jesse. Peace be unto thee, and peace be unto thine helpers, for thy God helpeth thee. Then David received them and made them captains of the band. As he went to Ziklag, there fell to him of Manasseh Adnah and Josabad, and Jediael, and Michael, and Josabad, and Elihu, and Zilthai, captains of the thousands that were of Manasseh. For at that time, day by day, there came to David to help him until it was a great host, like the host of God. And after King Saul's death, the kingdom was divided. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, ruled over Israel, and David was made king over Judah, and ruled them for 7 years and 6 months. According to Young's Analytical Concordance to the Bible, King Saul lived from 1096 to 1056 BC. So he was only 40 years old at the time of his death, when he was slain in the battle of Gilboa, with 3 of his sons, Jonathan included. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 21. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions, and such a man was David. Ishbosheth was murdered by his own captains, who sought reward from David, who slew them for their wickedness. Then all Israel gathered to David unto Hebron, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. And moreover, in times past, even when Saul was king, thou wast he that leddest out and broughtest in Israel. Only a man of might could lead Israel's army. And the Lord thy God said unto thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be ruler over my people Israel. And so the armies of Israel came together to make David their king, the king over all of Israel, not just Judah. And these are the numbers of the bands that were ready armed to war, and came to David to Hebron, to turn the kingdom of Saul to him, according to the word of the Lord. The children of Judah that bare shield and spear were 6,800, ready armed to war. Of the children of Simeon, mighty men of valor for the war, 7,100. Of the children of Levi, 4,600. And Jehoiada was the leader of the Aaronites, and with him were 3,700. And Zadok, a young man, mighty of valor, and of his father's house 22 captains. And of the children of Benjamin, the kindred of Saul, 3,000. For hitherto the greatest part of them had kept the ward of the house of Saul. And the children of Ephraim, 20,800 mighty men of valor, famous throughout the house of their fathers. And of the half-tribe of Manasseh, 18,000, which were expressed by name to come and make David king. And of the children of Issachar were men that had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. The heads of them were 200, and all their brethren were at their commandment. Of Zebulun's, such as went forth to battle, expert in war with all instruments of war, 50,000 which could keep rank, and they were not of double heart. And of Naphtali, and with them with shield and spear 37,000. And of the Danites, expert in war, 28,600. And of Asher, such as went forth to battle, expert in war, 40,000. And on the other side of Jordan, of the Reubenites and the Gadites, and of the half-tribe of Manasseh, with all manner of instruments of war for the battle, 120,000. All these men of war that could keep rank came with a perfect heart to Hebron, to make David king over all Israel, not just Judah. And all the rest also of Israel were of one heart to make David king over both kingdoms. And there they were with David 3 days, eating and drinking, for their brethren had prepared for them. Moreover, they that were nigh them, even unto Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali, brought bread on asses, and on camels, and on mules, and on oxen, and meat, meal, cakes of figs, bunches of raisins, and wine, and oil, and oxen, and sheep abundantly, for there was joy in Israel. And so when you add up all the mighty men in this army, it comes to 348,022 men, plus thousands that were not mentioned that were with David from the beginning. All of them big, powerful, well-trained, valiant men of renown. So David was now king over all of the tribes of Israel. However, he still had many battles to fight, mostly with the Philistines. And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. And the inhabitants of Jebus said unto David, Thou shalt not come hither. Nevertheless, David took the castle of Zion, which is the city of David. And David said, Whosoever smiteth the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, David's sister, went first up and was chief. And David dwelt in the castle, therefore they called it the city of David. And he built the city round about, even from Milo round about, and Joab repaired the rest of the city. That was probably damaged when they conquered it. And in one of the battles that he fought, he was nearly killed by the giant Ishbi-Benob. Abishai, the son of David's sister, Zeruiah, a nephew, who lifted up his spear and killed 300 at one time, saved David by slaying Ishbi-Benob, the giant. When David fought with Ishbi-Benob, one of the brothers of Goliath, David waxed faint, and Ishbi-Benob thought to have slain David. But Abishai, David's nephew, stepped in and slew the giant Philistine. Only mighty men like David and Abishai could fight a giant in single combat. Then the men of David sware unto him, saying, Thou shalt no more go out with us to battle, that thou quench not the light of Israel. Evidently, David led his mighty men into battle, for he was just as mighty as they were. Later on, Sibbeshai, the Hushathite, slew Saph, which was one of the sons of the giant. And there was again a battle in Gob, where Elhanan, the son of Jeroregim, slew the brother of Goliath, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature, that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number. And he was also born to the giant. And when he defied Israel, another of David's nephews, Jonathan, the son of Shimea, the brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David, and by the hand of his servants and his relations. David's life was full of hardship and sorrows. And as Young's Analytical Concordance puts it, 75 of the Psalms have his name prefixed to them, and remain imperishable monuments of his poetic genius, and his unfeigned piety, repentance, and hope in God. And so it was that David prevailed over his enemies, built an empire, brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, lived in the palace that he built, made the kingdom secure, and thus completed all that he set out to do except one thing: build the temple of God. But he did stockpile many precious materials for its construction, for his son Solomon to use when he became king, and constructed one of the most amazing temples ever built. So now for the contradiction. 1 Samuel 17, verse 55 and 56. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, Whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son the stripling is. So 1 minute Saul is trying armor on David and blessing him, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And David was his armor bearer, who played a harp for him, a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and the Lord is with him, who Saul sent for to fight Goliath. And the next he is asking who he is. It would seem that these 2 verses are out of context. Thanks for watching.